Health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to the Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. I'm your host, Sara Banta. I'm a wife, a busy mom of three, and the founder of the cutting edge and award-winning supplement brand Accelerated Health Products. This podcast is more than just a source of information. It's a community for you and those looking to optimize their health. I release new episodes every Monday and Tuesday live and a bonus one on Thursday. So remember to subscribe and add to your playlist. You'll never miss a show. And join my free health group coaching on Telegram. There is no downside. I teach on a daily basis. I answer your questions, and you are supported by an amazing group. The details can be found on my website, sarabantahealth.com. And my goal, I need your help, is to reach everyone who needs my message of healing and not those who don't want to hear it. Help me with this goal by sharing this podcast with a few of your friends and loved ones. And together we can empower each other on our journey to optimal health. And I'm so excited to have back one of my very favorite guests who, it's not very often that you get a brilliant person who can actually talk in layman's terms. And that's what we have with Kiran Krishnan. He's back. He is a research microbiologist, always working on something new. Super excited to have you, Kiran. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me, Sara.
Well, in my household, I had the skin that had acne all the time. And even at 48, I can have blemishes. And then my husband suffered from eczema. So he never had a zit in his life. Unfortunately, all three of my kids got my skin. I tell them that they won't have as many wrinkles as they would if they had a skin. But they do suffer from the acne. And, we're talking about not just acne, but we've got rosacea. We do have eczema, psoriasis. The skin is a window into the health. And you've come on before talking about the gut-brain axis, but now today we're talking about the gut-skin. So I'm super excited to talk about this. My least favorite question when parents come to me is, what product can you give my son who eats Doritos and pizza and beer every day for his acne, right? Because it's not that simple. So let's get into it. Let's get into what does it mean where the skin is the window into what is going on inside the body?
Yeah, and so, it's beyond a window. I would actually say the skin is both a window and a door based on some new research, and I'll explain what that means. And when you say my kids got my skin, to be even more accurate, it's not that they got your skin, it's that they got your skin and your gut, right? And so that combination of dysbiosis on the skin and dysbiosis in the gut is what drives a lot of the inflammatory outcomes on the skin, whether it is psoriasis or eczema or some form of dermatitis or even acne. Those are all inflammatory conditions of the skin that are driven largely by a combination of having dysfunction in the gut and dysfunction on the skin. Both things typically need to be present in order for those to manifest themselves, right? So what do I mean when I say that the skin is not only the window but also the door? To put it, more finely, what that means really is that we used to think of the skin as a representation of how unhealthy or healthy our insides are, right? If your skin is aged, if your skin is inflamed, if you've got irritations, sensitivities, fine lines, wrinkles, dryness, all of those things may indicate that the inside is unhealthy and it's being reflected upon the skin. That's still true. However, there's nuance to that now, and there's a new dimension to that. Studies called there's a big study, and lots of studies have come out of it. Lots of papers have come out of it, called the Baltimore Longitudinal Study on Aging, that has shown that the skin is not only a reflection of the inside, but can be an independent risk factor of driving aging and age-related disorders internally.
Wow.
So age skin in this study, and I'll explain the study in a moment, was found to be an independent risk factor for creating age-related disorders like osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, and so on. So imagine that skin dysfunction was a driver of these conditions that we normally don't relate to the skin itself. Now, what was the study, right? And how do they do it? So this is a very interesting study because it was one of the first longevity or aging studies that followed each individual throughout their aging process. So most aging related studies, what they'll do is they'll take a cohort of, let's say, people in their 80s right now, and then they'll compare a number of things to people in their 30s right now. The problem with that kind of approach is that people in the 80s went through very different things when they were 30 than current 30-year-olds, right? So it's not a apples to apples type comparison. What this study did instead, and this was nearly 50 years ago, is they got thousands of individuals and they said, let's follow each individual as their own control through their process of aging from their late 20s, early 30s, all the way up to their 80s plus. And let's mark and record and figure out all the choices that they make, the lifestyle, the diet, everything, and then and how that changes their outcomes when it comes to disease prevalence, disease risk, mortality, and so on, right? So this was a really fascinating study. And then when they looked at predictive analytics, when they're trying to look at what within those individuals could predict their risk of chronic disease and even death, they found that age skin was a significant predictor of chronic disease and death. And included in that is inflamed skin as well, right? So dysfunction on the skin was actually not only a predictor, but a driver. And they found that the skin usually starts to get dismantled almost a decade before those diseases become prevalent in that individual, right? So the skin is a driver. And so this is what we now refer to as leaky skin. So you have leaky gut, which is driven by dysbiosis in the gut. Leaky gut leads to all kinds of inflammation and nutrient disruptions, immune dysregulation, and so on. And we'll connect all those to the skin as we go along here. And then we have leaky skin, which is also driven by dysregulation of microbes on the skin, which drives inflammation, barrier dysfunction of the skin, so things actually leak through the skin when they're not supposed to, and then recruitment of unfavorable immune responses. Kind of go hand in hand.
So are you telling me that I should not be scrubbing those good bacteria off my skin and just get everything off?
That's, yeah, like many other things we come to find out, right? That over cleaning, that over sterilization is a problem. We know that to be a problem in our bodies. We know that to be a problem in our food system. We know that to be a problem in our environment in general. But now we're coming to find out that that's absolutely true for the skin. If your skin is relatively healthy, it means that you've got good beneficial microbes on the skin. And if you're sterilizing your skin quite often and you're cleaning it too often, you can absolutely drive dysbiosis on your skin, just like you can in your gut. It's no different than taking too many courses of antibiotics in your gut, right? If you're cleaning your skin twice a day with things that are antimicrobial, antiseptics, and so on, you're going to drive dysbiosis on your skin.
So it's interesting because I love that you mentioned that 30-year-olds today are going through a lot more than 30-year-olds, 50 years ago. And I always laugh because my parents have never thought about a carb, a fat, or a protein, right? Because it was real food. And now we've got 70% of the diet is processed food. We've got all of these toxins, fluoride, bromide, chlorine. We've got the spike protein that is triggering skin issues. I don't know if you've seen that, but I'm getting a lot of texts or emails saying, I have this rash that's coming out of nowhere. Heavy metals. In my own family, I have a child who literally was tested for heavy metals and they're through the roof because of where she practices her sport. And as she's detoxing, guess what's going on? It's coming out of her skin, and it's part of the process because your skin is your largest detox organ. So it's not just the dysbiosis, but it's also a way to get the junk out. And can you talk about that a bit? Because this is something that is on a whole nother level than it was 20 years ago or even 4 years ago.
Yeah, well, and I think to add to the list of things that you've mentioned, that 30-year-olds and 15-year-olds and 20-year-olds and so on are going through nowadays, that our parents' generation didn't necessarily go through, or even we didn't necessarily go through ourselves, are the isolation, the lack of outdoor exposure.
Yeah.
Right. We played in the dirt a lot more as kids, and that has a fortifying effect on our skin microbiome, and it has a fortifying effect on our gut. We were outside more as adults, even, right? Because we didn't have, of course, social media and things that kept us indoors, and yet trying to connect with people, we had to go outside in order to interact with people. And so that exposure outdoors makes a big difference. And then nowadays, even when you do go outside, like you said, there's a whole series of pollutants that are going to be entering into your system that disrupt not only your microbiome, but of course your immune system, your detox pathways, and so on. I just had, looking at the weather today, I'm in Chicago, and there's like environmental alert, right? There's the particulate matter in the air is too high, and it's high enough where it would be a problem for people with sensitive respiratory issues. So just walking outside nowadays is a risk, right? So when you think about all that, it's no surprise that our systems are dismantled. And that as a result of that, we start to see all of these inflammatory conditions becoming prevalent. Now, inflammation in the body, both in the skin and the gut and so on, can occur for two reasons, right? Number one, it's because your immune system is overreacting to things. Or number two, it's because your immune system is underreacting to things, right? So there's actually both of those spectrums. So now the overreaction is a typical response that we see, and it's your immune system responding to bacteria, viruses, bacterial toxins, environmental toxins, LPS from a leaky gut, environmental particulate matter that lands on your skin and so on. But then the underreaction can also drive inflammation, because there are parts of your immune system that get compromised when your gut microbiome isn't healthy. This is the regulatory part of your immune system. So this is called the Treg system. The Treg system's role is to teach and negate unfavorable immune responses in your body. So when your immune system inevitably reacts to something it shouldn't, like environmental particles or your own, skin cells or your own proteins, the Treg system is going to deregulate those responses and teach your immune system, hey, you shouldn't do that, right? So psoriasis and eczema that you mentioned, both of those are considered to be autoimmune conditions, right? That is your own immune system attacking your skin cells from underneath. Now, why is it doing that? Well, there's a trigger on the surface of the skin. So the Staph aureus, which is a type of pathogenic organism, has been known to be colonized in areas of the skin where you end up with psoriasis or eczema or many forms of dermatitis, really. Dermatitis just meaning inflammation of the skin. So what's happening is that microbe is sitting there on a given part of your skin. It's taking over the population in that area. It starts to produce certain toxins like phenols. These toxins create an immune reaction in that area, and your immune system comes along and goes, hey, there's something bad here. We're going to react to it to protect the host. But because the T regulatory system is not functioning properly, and that has to do with gut dysbiosis and leaky gut, what happens, your immune system shows up to that area and just starts attacking everything in that area. It doesn't necessarily know what it's attacking. It just knows there's something there. It knows there's a trigger there. So it just starts attacking things. So it's starting to break down your collagen, your elastin fibers, your ceramide layer, which maintains the moisture in that area. It's breaking down your actual skin cells. This is why you get the redness, the itching, the rash, the really severe dryness in that area, because the structures of the skin are actually being attacked by your own immune system, right? So this is a combination of having the wrong microbe on the surface triggering the wrong immune response from your gut to your skin because your gut is also dysbiotic, and the lack of function of the regulatory part of the immune system to stop all of those unfavorable responses, right? So it's a combination of things that occur. It's the same thing that occurs in acne. Acne is often triggered by a bacteria called Cutibacterium acnesis. A lot of people who have acne will tend to have an overgrowth of that bacteria. That bacteria can get in the pores. When the pores clog up, and these individuals will typically produce higher levels of sebum, so then the pores get clogged up. This anaerobic environment where this pathogen is can trigger an inflammatory response. The immune system comes along, and like any other unfavorable immune response, there's too much inflammation being created. The sebaceous glands, in response to that immune system, produce even more sebum, and then they produce like a little mound called a comedone, which is really what the acne lesion is, right? So now you can have acne popping up all over your face, but that's triggered by dysbiosis on the skin and a combination of dysbiosis in the gut that leads to a dysfunctional immune response. That combination creates lots and lots of problems, including dismantling some of the detox pathways, messing up how lymph flows through your system, allowing too much moisture to escape your skin because that inflammation is breaking down your ceramide layer. And because it breaks down the ceramide layer, and for people that aren't familiar, your ceramide layer is this really nice fatty acid layer right in your epidermis, in the bottom part of your epidermis. This fatty acid layer basically acts as a physical barrier, keeping moisture from going out because oil and water don't mix, right? So it traps water in your skin, keeping you moisturized. And it also prevents toxins because a lot of toxins are oil soluble. It prevents toxins from penetrating through and entering into circulation. If that ceramide layer gets broken up, then what happens is you get a lot of moisture loss through the skin, through evaporation, and you get your skin drying out and forming wrinkles, and your elastin and collagen fibers that are supposed to be taut like this, they become dysfunctional and they start bending, right? They don't spring back. So when you frown or you make any facial expressions, what's supposed to happen is those lines form, but they spring back, right? Imagine over the time, if they don't spring back, the lines create permanent creases. So then you see all these fine lines all over the place. All of that also then means that the barrier is not functioning. So then toxins not only can land on your skin, but penetrate through and enter into circulation that can create massive inflammation throughout the body. So when I talk about skin and the importance of skin, I'm not just talking about the cosmetic things that we're all concerned about, right? We don't want to age our skin. We don't want inflammation and all that. I'm talking about skin beyond that as a component of our health and wellness system, and a big driver of chronic disease and dysfunction if it's allowed to become leaky, and it starts with dysbiosis.
So essentially, with leaky gut, like if you have a really strong gut integrity and you eat a bad meal, and then someone with leaky gut has that same meal, they're going to have a worse response because the first person has a strong barrier to protect them and to process the bad food. So It's the same with the skin, where if I'm being attacked by heavy metals in the air, or, jet fuel is coming down on me, or I'm breathing in some really, the smog or whatever you are experiencing in Chicago today. If you've got leaky skin, you're going to have a worse reaction than someone that has a really strong barrier. Correct?
That's absolutely right. So think about it this way as well. Imagine the barrier of your skin is compromised, which means, and that ceramide layer that I mentioned is in the epidermis, right? So that's a top layer of your skin. And it's there for a reason, because we don't want stuff penetrating beyond that top layer, right? Remember that a lot of the top layer of your skin is actually dead skin cells. And they're there specifically to act like little bricks that are piled up, right? So that it makes it harder for things to penetrate through. And then beyond that layer of dead skin cell bricks, if you will, there's a ceramide layer. So if that ceramide layer is compromised and your skin is leaky, what happens is the toxins leak further into the dermis, where you have a lot of lymphatics, circulation and blood circulation and immune function and all that. So someone with a strong barrier on their skin could walk through outside the way it is right now, and all these irritants might fall on your skin, but they remain on the top layer, thereby not triggering any sort of immune responses. When you wash, when you shower later on today, they're just going to wash off and it's fine. If someone has a leaky barrier on the skin, it's going to go in further. That's going to trigger an immune response. Those individuals are going to get redness, irritation, scratching, itching on their skin. They're going to feel the symptoms of being outside in unhealthy air. Now, on top of that, those individuals, if they have the leaky gut, like you said, that they would typically have even more of an inflammatory response, because leaky gut leads to systemic unfavorable inflammatory responses, right? So that individual will have a double whammy, where not only is the incoming offensive compound triggering a localized inflammation, your gut is going to send a bunch of dysfunctional immune cells to that area that'll further damage the skin and other components of your own system in that given area.
So if I'm a female who's fighting wrinkles, but I have leaky skin, will putting collagen, on top topically help? And taking collagen, would that help? Or is it kind of like with leaky gut, where you're really not absorbing the nutrients because your body's not functioning properly?
Yeah, it's hard to see how collagen on its own, which is, remember, an inert substance, right? How that is going to fix or support the skin without there being the right triggers to utilize the collagen properly, right? The analogy I give to people is, imagine you wanted to become more muscular, you wanted to become stronger. We know that muscles are made out of protein. So if you want to build muscle and you want to become stronger, you have to take protein, right? But you can't just take protein, right? You can't sit around all day long and not do any exercise, just take protein all day expecting it to build muscle. You still need the stimulus. You still need all the biochemical pathways on to trigger the myogenic response, which is the generation of muscle fiber from dietary protein. And that is the weightlifting and resistance training and so on, right? So that's the same thing in the skin. Just taking or applying collagen in itself is not necessarily going to trigger the synthesis of the elastin and collagen fibers and fix the skin. You still need to, number one, make sure that all the inflammatory things aren't going on, because even if you do replace the collagen that's damaged, you're just going to damage it again because there's so much inflammation going on. Number two, you do need to trigger skin repairing mechanisms to occur. Now, here's the interesting thing about that. There's lots of enzymes that can be triggered on the skin, both on the surface of the skin from microbes and then internally through the circulation as well. So many of these are like, for example, matrix metalloproteinases. So these are really a whole class of enzymes that rebuild the scaffolding of the skin, right, to repair damage. So for example, if you get a cut on your hand, the way it heals is by the activation of matrix metalloproteinases. But what some of the new studies are seeing is that when you get a cut on your hand, one of the first things that occurs is beneficial bacteria on your hand will actually go and surround the edges of the cut. And it's those bacteria that'll activate some of these enzymes that start rebuilding the scaffolding of the skin, right? So keep in mind, we have this really intimate relationship with bacteria. So many of our functions have been outsourced to microbes. This is another one of those examples. There are lots of bacteria that live on your skin that are very responsible for turning over and repairing the skin all day long, right? So for example, I'll just mention three things. So number one is the triggering of things like matrix metalloproteinases, right? So those are repairing enzymes that can repair any damage that occurs to the skin. A lot of the triggers to activate those enzymes come from microbes, beneficial microbes on the skin. The synthesis of elastin and collagen in the skin also requires epigenetic activation. That comes from beneficial bacteria on the skin. Maintaining the right pH of the skin, which is very important for the structure of the skin, including for the collagen and elastin structure of the skin, the keratinocytes, and all of the skin cells. Maintaining a lower pH, so skin has to be more acidic, right? Skin, the ideal pH is somewhere around like 4.2, 4.4. There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is all the proteins and all that make up the skin do better in the lower pH. They maintain their integrity better. Number two, it prevents fungus from overgrowing, from growing on the skin, right? It supports bacterial growth and prevents fungal growth. And how do you maintain the pH of your skin? It's not us, right? We're not doing anything. We don't have a mechanism for creating hydrochloric acid for the skin. What we're counting on is healthy bacteria on the skin taking the fatty acids, the oils that we secrete, breaking down the oils and releasing fatty acids that reduce the pH of the skin, right? So we need the healthy microbes on the skin, or the barrier system doesn't function. The collagen you take, all of those things won't necessarily function the way you think they will, because all the triggers and stimuli aren't there.
Very interesting. Well, over the last 4 years, we have noticed in my research that histamine response has skyrocketed. And you have to be careful with your diet, the healthy wrong foods, whether it's the oxalates or the foods that have sulfur in it, or the amyloid proteins in chicken and poultry and conventionally raised beef. They are causing an over-exaggerated histamine response. And I believe this is why a lot of people are seeing more rashes as well. You know, yes, inflammation in the body and brain fog and allergies and that sort of thing, but rashes and skin breakouts. So how do histamines play into leaky skin?
Yeah, you know, there's a couple of mechanisms here. Number one, what tends to happen is when your gut is dysfunctional, you tend to overexpress the function of certain types of immune cells called eosinophils and basophils, right? So these, instead of macrophages and dendritic cells and so on. So you've got many classes of immune cells that can protect the body from various things. Macrophages, dendritic cells, T cells, and all that are really good, favorable immune responders that can go after bacterial infections, viral infections, toxins, and so on. But then you also have another class, which are very inflammatory immune cells. They tend to be the first actors in a dysfunctional system. They are eosinophils and basophils. And what they do is they create a histamine response. Many people have heard of the IgE response, right? Immunoglobulin E. That's typically thought of as the allergic or histamine response that's unfavorable. So what tends to happen is when you have a dysfunctional gut microbiome, and thereby you have a compromised immune system, you tend to have lower expression of T cells, B cells, macrophages, and you tend to get a higher expression of eosinophils and basophils. So your system tends to react to most things through the histamine, what we call hypersensitivity response, right? So it could be an immediate type hypersensitivity or delayed type hypersensitivity, but nonetheless, your system is going to recruit the eosinophils and basophils to the area and have them respond instead of the macrophage and dendritic cell or T cell, right? And those eosinophils and basophils are going to be releasing histamines, and they release indoles, and they release a number of things that actually create a bunch of unfavorable inflammatory responses, in particular the kinds that are super irritating, very red, causes massive amounts of inflammation, right? So imagine you've got triggers on your skin because of dysbiosis. On top of that, triggers from your diet that drive more inflammation, and then your immune system leans towards this eosinophil basophil response. You're going to experience your immune system triggering that type of response against almost anything, right? So that individual can eat dairy, and dairy proteins being inflammatory for many people, they'll get a histamine basophil-like response, or they can rub up against something or something irritates their skin. And because they have more dysbiosis in the skin, that triggers a histamine basophil-like response, and they might get a really irritating red patch there, right? So it really goes back to what part of your immune system is really functioning at that point.
So we've talked about the fact that taking the typical probiotic can overpopulate your gut with too many of maybe the wrong thing. And I see a lot of probiotic skin topical things to use as well. Can you talk about what can go wrong with the typical probiotic for your skin and for your gut, and get into where the spore biotic for your skin and for your gut is a better choice.
Yeah, what I've seen in the world of probiotics for the skin, and to be accurate, you actually can't really even call it a probiotic on the skin, because almost any bacteria that you add to your skin through some sort of product is not necessarily going to live on your skin and function and colonize and so on. So it doesn't fit the definition of a probiotic. But what a lot of companies have done is they've created skin probiotics. But what they've done is they've taken gut bacteria, like very typical gut bacteria that only live in the gut, that don't necessarily live in the skin, and go, well, these are probiotics. We'll just put them in creams and make them skin probiotics, right? The problem with that is those don't really do anything, because the way our skin is designed is that we have two classes of microbes that live on the skin. Class number one are the permanent residents. These are the microbes that are always on the skin, no matter what. They were there from the time you were born. They were the early colonizers and the inhabitants of your skin, and they're there for life, basically. Then we have transient organisms that come onto your skin, typically through the environment. They might spend a few hours to a few days, but while they're there, they can have an effect on the permanent residents, and they can have an effect on the immune system, and they can have an effect on a number of things before they leave, right? Before they fall off the skin or get washed off and so on. Now, the effect that those have can be bad or good, right? So the way these types of organisms work, these non-resident microbes, the non-permanent ones, the transient ones, is they affect quorum sensing and they affect immune response. So what does that mean? Well, when they come and land on your skin, one of the things that they can do is to read the chemical signature of all the microbes in that area, and they can effectuate change among the microbes in that area by releasing enzymes, releasing antimicrobials, releasing postbiotics of some sort that can affect the ecosystem in that area, even for the short period of time that they're there, right? The other thing that they can do is trigger an immune response, whether it's a favorable or unfavorable immune response. Some microbes that land on your skin could actually have a favorable immune response. This is why, a lot of times if you're like having really bad skin issues, even just getting outside, going on hikes, getting some dirt on you, those things can actually make a difference, right? Remember, people used to do, and I don't know if they still do this at spas, but they used to do mud baths and things like that are really good for the skin. Now, there's minerals in there that are really good for the skin, but minerals aren't necessarily getting absorbed through the skin. They're acting as quorum sensing triggers on the skin. Also, that mud is loaded with microbes that have that quorum sensing effect, right? So when you think about good beneficial bacteria for the skin, what you really need is bacteria that can have a quorum sensing effect and has a modulatory effect on immune response on the skin, meaning it can reduce unfavorable immune responses, and it can change the microbiome in the given area where it lands in a favorable way. 99.99% of gut bacteria cannot do that. They don't do that. This is not what their function are, right? Spores are different. Now, why are spores different? Well, because if we keep in mind where we are supposed to naturally encounter spores, we're supposed to naturally encounter spores in the environment, right? Our ancestors ate off the land. They drank waters from rivers and streams. They foraged. They dug for roots and tubers. So they got a lot of dirt in their system. They engage with the dirt and the environment quite a bit. And through that, they got a lot of exposure to bacterial spores, both on their skin and internally as well. So through the course of human history, what has happened is we've had a symbiogenic adaptation with these spores where they can utilize their quorum sensing capability both in the gut and on the skin, right? That's one of the main ways that the spores work in the gut. That's how we fix leaky gut with the spores, is because when they go in there, they sense all the microbes in the area, they bring down the dysfunctional microbes, and they increase the growth of beneficial microbes. At the same time, they produce all these compounds that really help the rest of the gut microbiome and the immune system. They produce short-chain fatty acids, lactic acids, enzymes, carotenoids, all of these really important things. So keep in mind that spores in the gut are modulating immune responses and changing the microbiome. The spores on the skin are doing the same exact thing. They're modulating immune responses and changing the skin microbiome in a favorable way. So that's why the spores can be functional in both areas. And that is supported by evolutionary medicine in humans, right? We've been encountering these organisms on our skin, in our digestive tract, in our respiratory tract since the dawn of mankind. And so that was the idea for us to go, well, let's see if spores can actually function on the skin. And sure enough, we found that they do quite dramatically.
So just a reminder, everybody, the Megaspore is the spore biotic, and I use this daily. Everyone in my family does, and it is a hot seller at Accelerated Health Products because people feel a difference. And with the Mega Pre especially. And we talked about in our episode on weight loss that these two can help with weight loss regardless of what your diet is. Now, I don't recommend you just have any sort of diet, and I want to get into that in a minute. But these are phenomenal, and that combination, you can add the mega mucosa as well to help with the gut lining and the gut integrity. The sieve. So after Kiran came on last time, I actually did a test with a group of ladies that were over 50 years old. So we're not talking about women who have acne or teenagers. We're talking about women that had wrinkles, and did a 30-day study. And every single one of them saw an improvement in their skin, the skin tone, the moisture. That was the biggest thing, was the moisture. And they loved the feel of their skin. I am addicted to this. It's called Sieve. And I use it twice a day. I don't know if I need it that much, but I can't stop using it. So I love this. And it is that spore-based topical serum. So that, excuse me, those are the supplements that are spore-based to help with the leaky gut and the leaky skin. But we have to, I know, Kiran, you're seeing results from people with these products without changing their diet. But let's talk about some key things, because I feel like our food system has been hijacked. And I talk a lot about it, even the healthy food. So what are the things that we should, number one, absolutely start cutting out of our diet?
For healthy skin, if you tend to have inflammation on your skin, maybe you had acne as a kid, and then now as an adult, maybe you still get a pimple from time to time, but you're feeling like your skin is a little thin and a little red and sensitive, then you absolutely want to cut out dairy and gluten. The studies on diet and inflammation on the skin, especially acne, there are something like 52 studies, and a lot of the conclusion is that dairy, proteins, and gluten are big triggers of inflammation that can translate to the skin. So those are two things I would absolutely cut out. Of course, everyone should cut out highly processed foods anyway, no matter what your skin looks like. That's just not good for anything, really. But among actual whole foods, those are two things I would look at. And then you'd want to start trying to add more fiber and more carotenoids and polyphenols. And the reason for the carotenoids and the polyphenols is that one of the protections that you have on your skin, one of the ways to make your skin resilient, is by increasing skin carotenoid levels. And the reason for that is, we know that UV radiation can be damaging to the skin, right? If we're exposed to the sun a lot, it can increase wrinkles. Well, why is that? Well, that's because the sun is radiation, and the radiation that gets absorbed from UVA and UVB rays will actually affect your skin cells over a 24-hour period after you even come out of the sun. But that can be quenched by increasing carotenoids in the skin. So carotenoids are those protective molecules for damage from things like UV radiation and other chemical irritants on the skin. So you want to have high carotenoid levels, and those carotenoids come from diet. Now, interestingly enough, the Megaspore, one of the strains in there, which is actually a key thing that makes that probiotic so unique, is this HE36 strain, which is a high carotenoid producing strain. It produces very high levels of 13 different carotenoids in the lining of the gut where it sits, which means these are very bioavailable carotenoids. And we actually did 2 studies looking at skin carotenoid levels just from taking the HE36, and we saw a dramatic increase in skin carotenoid levels when you take the HE36. So just the probiotic alone will help with that quite a bit, but if you can get more carotenoids into your diet, that's always really good. And within the scope of carotenoids are also this whole set of compounds called polyphenols. Polyphenols are these, and they come from colored fruits and vegetables and so on. Berries and cherries and things like that tend to be very high in polyphenols. What's great about polyphenols is, of course, they are themselves antioxidants, which are very important to reduce oxidative stress on your skin, in your gut lining, and everywhere else in the body. That's part of what damages those tissues over time. But the other thing that polyphenols do is they improve the production of short chain fatty acids and increase the growth of akkermansia. And akkermansia helps manage blood sugar well. And when you manage blood sugar well, your skin actually ends up healthier, right? So we see that individuals with poor blood sugar management get microvascular circulation issues. This is why diabetics can lose their toes and their feet and so on. And they also get really bad melasma, darkening of the skin all over the place, age spots, and all of these things that occur on people at higher risk in people with diabetes. That's because all the microcirculation to the skin is significantly compromised, which means we can't get good stuff to the skin and we can't take away bad stuff from the skin, right? So having a healthy gut microbiome, having good levels of short chain fatty acids, and good growth of akkermansia can really help with that microvascular circulation, which is really important for maintaining skin health.
Well, it all goes together. As you were talking about dairy and gluten, gluten kills the thyroid, right? And if your thyroid is going to slow down, everything slows down. Your lymph, your constipation, your brain fog, everything. And so the body is just this very intricate system that everything is dependent on each other. And that's why you can go to see somebody and go, God, you look amazing. And they really didn't change anything, but they've got this aura and this glow from their skin because their body is full and vibrant. And with what's going on now with Ozempic and some of these weight loss drugs, what you're seeing is, people aren't eating and they're shrinking, but they're not having to focus on nutrient dense food, number one. So they're getting a gray tone to their skin because there's no nutrients that they're taking in and they're becoming sunk in. So, you kind of get what you pay for with what you do for your body. What are some of the lifestyle hacks outside of diet that help with skin?
A couple of things. Number one is, I think we talked about this earlier, that not over cleaning your skin is really important. You don't need to shower twice a day. I know a lot of people that shower twice a day. I know a lot of people that use soap and which is antimicrobial twice a day on their skin. Moisturizing the skin can be very important as well. But even more important than moisture on top of the skin, everyone should be moisturizing the skin from the outside for sure. But the way your skin actually builds moisture is from the inside by shoring up that ceramide layer. So taking in foods that actually contain high levels of phytoceramides is actually really important. So where we get the ceramide layer on your skin, which is a very, very important protective barrier, is from plants. There are a whole class of plants that have high levels of phytoceramides, for example, rice bran and a number of different fibers. So if you just Googled, foods high in phytoceramides, you'll start to see products that you could, or foods that you can consume where the phytoceramides are extracted from the food, they're taken to the liver converts them to ceramides that we use on our skin and then transports them to the skin to rebuild the barrier of the skin. Right. So it's a really, really important component that we don't think about. Most people are not even aware of the ceramide layer. And certainly not aware that eating certain types of plants is what builds that ceramide layer. And it's one of the most important barrier structures in your body, right? The ceramide layer is the first barrier that you have in your system as you engage with the world around you, right? So I would say that certainly not over cleansing your skin, certainly not using strong antimicrobials in your skin. You don't have to wash your hands with those antibacterial soaps. Just use regular old soap, and allowing yourself some time to not necessarily be over sterilized, but then also increasing your phytoceramide intake which is something that most people have no awareness of at all. I actually take phytoceramides in a product. There's a product called Glow that's made by a company called Source. And they've put clinical levels of phytoceramides in it. It's actually a little dark chocolate ball. And it's fantastic. So you can get it from your diet. You can get it from a treat like that as well. That's it's a nice experience. The other thing I would say is rest. We don't really understand and appreciate the importance of sleep when it comes to skin health, right? We all know it to some degree, but we don't necessarily engage with it mentally all the time. We know that when we don't sleep, our skin looks sloppy and dry and maybe looks more wrinkly and so on. And to get that tautness is really important. Oh, one last thing. You mentioned the glow. The glow is a really important part because one of the reasons why skin can look dull as you age is because there is a building up of layers of dead cells on the skin. Now, in order for those dead cells to turn over, you have to have certain beneficial bacteria on your skin that break down those dead cells and get rid of them. That way you actually start to see the glow on the skin, right? And so that's one of the things that Civ can certainly help with, is improving the microbiome of the skin so that you get that glow even more naturally.
Kiran, that was the first thing I noticed with my skin when I started the product. Within 2 days, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got glow. Well, I love the Civ. Like I said, I use it every day, twice a day. I use it with my accelerated facelift spray and cream. And the accelerated facelift cream was actually a product my husband was using for his eczema. And I started stealing it and thought, this is getting rid of my brown spots and my acne. So it's anti-inflammatory. It literally is food for the skin and works really beautifully with the Civ product. So check out the accelerated facelift bundle, which includes the Civ, or you can try out the Civ on its own, and make sure you're addressing your gut with the Mega Spore and the Mega Pre at the very least, and start eliminating some of the foods we've talked about. And I'm super excited. I'm not going to tell you guys now, but Kiran is working on something new, of course, because he is so brilliant and he doesn't stop. And so we will be talking more about that in the future, Kiran. So thank you. And thanks for coming on. And everyone else, thanks for tuning in today. If this is overwhelming, if you don't know where to start, just feel free to reach out to me at sarabantahealth.com. Happy to put together a protocol for you, whether it's your gut or your skin, and join my free group coaching on Telegram. There's no downside. I share daily tips and tools to improve your health, answer your questions. You'll be surrounded by an amazing community of people who are on a similar path. And there's more information on my website, sarabantahealth.com. You got to know that I've suffered from acne. And I've suffered from wrinkles now that I'm 48. And I've suffered from hair loss. I've suffered from all of it. And gut issues. It's all related. And when my gut feels good, my skin is better. And there's actually a map to your face where some areas of the face, and we should have touched on this, but we ran out of time, where some areas on your face could be a mirror to a different organ or area in the body. But there is so much information on this. If you're overwhelmed, make sure you reach out to me. And don't forget to follow me on social media at Accelerated Health Products. You can catch this podcast on over 100 platforms, including Spotify, iTunes, and iHeartRadio. Just search Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. And like I said, I'm on a mission to share my healing message with everyone who is ready to listen. And you can help me with that goal by sharing this podcast. Leave a comment, subscribe, and give this episode to one of your best friends. Remember, I'm live every Monday and Tuesday, and you can use coupon WELCOME10 to get 10% off your first order. If you're wanting to try out the Civ or the Mega Spore and the Mega Pre, they're all in the Leaky gut bundle, or the accelerated facelift bundle. Once again, thanks again for joining us here, and have a great week.